Recently, I've heard and even personally argued that we're in a golden age of anime. There's an overwhelmingly large amount of good shows, and new ones are constantly being added to the pile. With that oversaturation come strategies, bold taglines, and hooks utilized to differentiate new shows. So what about the stories that are thriving in this dynamic, built completely around their gimmick, before eventually evolving to be so much more? Welcome to this week's video. My name is Pei, and today we're talking about when a show develops into more than what you first expected. Today's video is brought to you by Skillshare. I'm always happy to come back to this partnership because it's so in line with things I really believe in. Skills are a byproduct of effort and guidance. And while Skillshare can't supplement the first part, it absolutely can help with the second, because having the right resources can do a lot for saving you time. Skillshare offers a wide variety of different classes. From music and audio to marketing and business and everything in between, Skillshare offers classes on visual arts, writing, productivity. And on the topic of writing, there's a great class I took recently from Sabati here on how to build believable characters. My channel's filled to the brim with videos talking about great characters, so to see how a published and successful author goes about crafting their own is fascinating. One great example of this in the class is a character interview. Ultimately, a variation of character sheets that feel more intuitive and natural. Something I'm a huge advocate for with Skillshare is how they have information on each class's difficulty level. Being able to quickly navigate and find content at the level you want is incredibly useful. Mix in a wide variety of classes and you end up with something pretty cool. If this interests you, the first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare plus 20% off your first year. Get started today. Now let's get back to the video. There's this idea that applies to YouTube videos, music, and even anime, that on its own, being good isn't enough. Yes, there are exceptions, but when someone tries to create a popular piece of media, it has to not only be worth watching, but also get people to click in the first place. The more saturated the market, the more true this is. Take what was previously the most common genre in anime as an example. Isekai's entire gimmick is to introduce a character who dies and is reincarnated into another world. If that gimmick becomes quickly worn out, you'll go from reincarnating the hero as simply overpowered to bringing them back as a slime and eventually a vending machine. Gimmicks can and often go too far, defining a show and suffocating it, leaving no room for it to evolve past its initial hook into an actually compelling story. But that's not always the case. Sometimes stories are established behind strong, well-executed gimmicks before evolving into so much more. My two favorite standout examples of this are Dungeon Meshi and Kaguya-sama Love is War. The former is the more recent of the two. Dungeon Meshi is a show built around a cooking gimmick. It's placed in a classic medieval fantasy setting and proves that telling can be just as much fun as showing, treating a traditional D&D monster structure as an ecological field to be studied. Each episode is built around the main party's deeper venture into a dungeon, stuck with no resources and a loose time limit. They have to survive off of the environment, which in this case means living off of meals made from ghoulish, unappetizing monsters. There's a formula to it. The party ventures further into the dungeon, shenanigans happen, they have an encounter with a new creature where the monster's biology becomes a central part of them defeating it, then finally they prepare a meal from their spoils. This show's gimmick plays first into humor and then second into intrigue. First, it's funny, but it's also pretty interesting. And that serves as a foundation for what ends up being bigger. From the very start, there are implications that this story could be something more. Dark undertones, fantastic animation, and sometimes very serious tone are mixed in between the low-stakes adventure and formulaic approach. Pretty heavy themes about the importance of taking care of oneself, especially during rough times, are highlighted and built around the idea of sustenance. And then about halfway through the first season, there's a major shift in tone. I actually made a whole video talking about that exact dynamic. This show goes places you wouldn't expect, becoming a mix of humor, horror, and fantasy. And what makes this specific switch so impressive, the reason I'm making this video, is because it doesn't abandon its gimmick within that change. Everything's set up around the dungeon as an ecological environment and the cycle of consumption, becoming not only a central aspect of the story's conflict, but also potentially the solution to that conflict. Consumption and sustenance are explored from the start in its gimmick through its deeper themes. Dungeon Meshi to me is starting to feel more and more like a cult classic. It has such a tight-knit core audience. Now I'm unsure if it'll ever reach the heights of popularity that a lot of the shows I talk about on this channel already have kind of reached, But the love people feel for this show is almost tangible, and I think it exists because what this show does, it does very well, falling very neatly into this Goldilocks zone that I call fun first, meaningful second. There's a lot of amazing pieces of media that aren't consumed because they require a level of investment from the audience that's pretty demanding, especially in a world filled with great shows. Why do so many anime viewers have long lists of shows they should be watching, but continue to push off in favor of stories that are kind of trashy or mid? I think a very important part of anime and storytelling in general that's often undervalued on paper, but represented well in actual consumption is how easy a show is to watch, how much it makes you want to come back and pick it up again after stopping. Ranking of Kings, for example, is an anime that I kind of think to be a masterpiece, despite having failed to watch it 3 different times. Pretty consistently, some things come along and interrupted me and I don't pick it back up. Whereas I find myself rewatching tons of anime over and over. Haikyuu, Skip and Loafer, Kaguya-sama Love is War. All of these I've seen multiple times and revisit regularly. But there's a long list of shows I should be watching that I'm actively ignoring. This leads back to that fun first, meaningful second thing that I was talking about earlier. Fun first is immediately intuitive, makes something easy and enjoyable to watch. But the second part is incredibly important and kind of why these stories stick around in people's brains. Anime is very often defined by its peaks. Emotional resonance tends to lead to a lasting impact, especially when there's substance there to think about. There are lots of easy, fun shows that are forgotten, quickly moved on from because they never go anywhere meaningful. But that's what I love about Dungeon Meshi and Kaguya-sama. They go somewhere significant. It's hard to explain just how big Kaguya-sama Love is War's initial run was. It's a show that briefly took over anime. It was easy to watch, had fantastic self-aware humor, and felt fresh in an overly derivative market. Clips and memes from the show went viral, a specific standout being a single outro in the 3rd episode of Chika Fujiwara dancing. On YouTube, there are millions of views specifically just dedicated to scenes of the delivery from Ian Sinclair as the narrator in the English dub. Kaguya-sama, at the height of its recency bias, briefly took the #1 spot on my anime list. But outside of all of its accolades and popularity, this show is just one of my personal favorites. As I got seasons into Kaguya-sama, what was initially viewed as a simple satirical story evolved into something deeply emotional. It spurred this resurgent love I have for well-crafted romance and slice-of-life anime. It's also the only show I've currently released an hour-long video essay on. All this to say that it's a major component of why I love to talk about this medium. And it all started with a gimmick. Anime has tons of extreme tropes that often alienate new viewers and are made fun of by the community. Kaguya-sama's gimmick mixes 2 of these really strong cliches. The first being characters' overly dramatic internal monologues that excessively explains their strategy during conflict. Death Note, one of the most well-known anime of all time and especially popular for viewers who are new to the medium, is a perfect example of this cliche. But the second is the drawn-out love confession. Shows in general, but especially romance anime, love existing in that place of longing, where 2 characters are nervous of messing up what they have, spending seasons on end refusing to share their feelings for one another. Kaguya-sama's gimmick took these 2 cliches and mixed them together really well, especially for initial comedic purpose. But this premise eventually evolves into the driving force to complex character arcs, not only for the 2 leads, but also those around them. Now, on the topic of the main characters, the premise of this show is taking 2 overachieving, aggressive students who secretly love each other and making them at odds. Because of their competitive environment, they believe whoever confesses first from that point on will be the loser of the relationship, forever working from a deficit. Now, these 2 characters, Miyuki Shirogane and Kaguya Shinomiya, are the president and vice president of Shushin Academy's student council, which in this story is considered one of the most prestigious high schools in all of Japan. The gimmick is that multiple times per episode, these 2 fight in a battle of wits, trying to trick their opponent into confessing their love. It's incredibly formulaic. The 2 leads try to best one another, a side character or circumstance throws a wrench in their carefully planned deception, and the circumstance devolves from a serious melodramatic tone to a softer humorous one. And finally, someone's declared the winner. Now, these consistent and successful tone shifts acknowledge that ultimately Kaguya-sama is a show about high schoolers who like one another, showcasing that ultimately low stakes can still feel monumental. It's a consistent part of being young and emotional, and while teenagers tend towards the melodramatic, those emotions do feel incredibly real. Now, Kaguya-sama's gimmick was the main reason I watched the show. It sold me on the premise, whereas with Dungeon Meshi I had friends promising eventual depth. Now, both of these shows' gimmicks, while strong enough to stand on their own, evolve, making each episode fun, but much more importantly, as the stories went on, tying into much bigger arcs. Now, what makes these shows so good is a little semantic. They don't evolve past their gimmicks, they evolve with them. These themes of food and love being war aren't retconned to no longer be important, but central to an evolving plot. They never go away, and the character traits that allow them to exist are crucial to each individual arc. Part of what makes these stories so interesting is that if you were to ask a viewer as they consume it to define what they think the show to be, it would change constantly, with every single one of those little definitions of the show being fulfilled at the time incredibly well. Kaguya-sama and Dungeon Meshi and many other shows actually fall into this fascinating existence where they change so much as they go on, without ever feeling like they abandoned what initially made them so special. So it's pretty hard to talk about why this is so true for Dungeon Meshi without pretty major spoilers. But with Kaguya-sama Love is War, I think I can explain it pretty well with only minor spoilers. So a quick warning for anyone that needs it. Like I stated earlier, Kaguya-sama Love is War is built around its two lead protagonists. Now, these characters are initially introduced a little bit like anti-heroes, with as many negative traits, maybe even more, than positive traits. I don't think that they're being presented initially to be likable, but the faults that at first define these main characters are more double-edged than we give credit. As the story goes on, more information surrounding the characters is revealed to the audience. Kaguya Shinomiya is a character that's incredibly pompous, born into a family that's defined by its name, facing from her earliest memories overbearing expectations of perfection. This character is defined by her cold personality and extreme judgment. This extreme upbringing has warped her expectations not only for herself, but others as well, resulting in an inability to connect with those around her. But later in the story, when we find out how Shirogane was introduced to Kaguya, those same traits are what make her so capable. When a student finds themselves in a desperate situation, unable to swim, slowly drowning, and everyone else freezes up, Kaguya leaps into action. That sureness and capability is something that Shirogane deeply admires. Kaguya's cruel treatment of those around her is not a byproduct of malice. She's simply extending the expectations she grew up in onto others. Even with all her ego, when presented with opportunities to be selfish, she passes up on them. To be amazing, do what's expected of her, and in many cases, do what's right. Her idealism has been encouraged by her environment. It's kind of the only way to cope with it, and it makes her so afraid of vulnerability. Shirogane is the same way. His overbearing ego and self-confidence is a byproduct of overwork. Coming from an opposite circumstance as Kaguya, Shirogane's had very little access to privilege. His position as president over Kaguya is only possible because of his ridiculous work ethic and self-confidence. He believes he's already inherently working from a disadvantage, which is acknowledged multiple times throughout the story. But by proving himself and presenting his successes unabashedly, it puts him on more even ground. And part of what makes these characters so likable is this information is presented to the audience very slowly. Over seasons of fantastic humor and entertainment, we're given all these little moments. Because while the characters grow, who they are and their personality traits aren't abandoned. The audience is just given information that recontextualizes them. Slowly, we learn why these two are enamored by one another. And as an audience member, I couldn't help but feel the same way. It also contributes perfectly to why they believe love is war. Why they struggle to open up to one another. Their lives consist of constant effort to make themselves presentable, to prove themselves to the systems they engage in, to each other. But what happens when that facade fades away? Because intimacy is vulnerable. It's a grand romance story that goes a million places I never would have expected. Slowly and suredly along the way building this expert foundation, utilizing the characters and their arcs so effectively, getting everything they can out of the gimmick and then evolving with it. It's just fantastic.